founding member of Greenpeace. He left in 1977 to start the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society and has since been coming up against all sorts of characters on the oceans. He has been fired upon, his vessels have been fired upon in international waters. He has been arrested several times. He has had his life threatened. He's actually been shot. He puts himself in the line of danger every single day. I can't think of anyone who is more befitting to speak on the topic of courage and resilience. I think if Tom Petty knew Paul, he probably would have written that song about him, I Won't Back Down, because this man is someone who clearly will not, has not, will never back down. Ladies and gentlemen, please give us a warm welcome to Captain Paul Watson.
I think they're going to show a brief film clip before I speak.
Today's top story, an activist anti-whaling group has clashed the waters off the Antarctic coast with the Japanese whaling fleet.
The group says it's driven the whalers out of Australian Antarctic waters and will continue to pursue and harass the Japanese fleet wherever it goes in a bid to save whales.
Our mission here, and this is the 5th year we've been down here, is to obstruct, intervene, interfere, harass, and try and shut down illegal whaling by the Japanese whaling fleet and the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary.
There's nothing wrong with being aggressive as long as you respect the sanctity of life.
Sea Shepherd maintains its anti-violence plan and its 30-year history. None of its actions have resulted in any injury.
We've told the Japanese captain that we're not tolerating their illegal whaling activities, which are prohibited by a federal court order from the nation of Australia. What Japan's doing down there is completely illegal. They're killing endangered species in an international sanctuary.
As long as the Japanese whaling fleet is down here operating illegally, we will continue to come down here and oppose them.
I love Paul Watson. I love what he does. It's like, what a beautiful, admirable, wonderful thing that he does out there defending animals and creatures that cannot defend themselves.
The state of the oceans right now is exceptionally serious. Almost every commercial fishing operation is in a state of diminishment or decline. The oceans are dying, and if they die, we die. It's as simple as that. What makes the difference really in the conservation movement is not governments, it's not big organizations, it's really the passion of individuals.
I just returned last month from the Southern Oceans, where we spent 3 months chasing the Japanese whaling fleet for about 8,000 miles along the Antarctic coast. This was our 6th voyage to the Southern Ocean and our most successful. This year, for the first time, we saved more whales than they killed. We saved 528, they killed 507. But we also cost them about $132 million in losses. And that is the language they understand, profit and loss. And that's why we've been down there, to make sure that every year they do not make a profit. Our goal is to sink the Japanese whaling fleet economically, that is to bankrupt them, and I think that we're going to be able to do that. Now, I wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for my crew, all volunteers from all over the world. And one of the criticisms of people who see whale wars is that my crew are inexperienced, and some people say incompetent. But you know, I couldn't pay people, I couldn't pay professionals to do what my volunteers do. You can't buy that kind of passion, and that's why we have them. And I took some comfort by looking at the letters to the editors of the London Times in 1911, when a similar criticism was directed towards Ernest Shackleton for having incompetent, inexperienced crew. And Shackleton said, you know, I don't want professionals, I want men who have the passion to get me to the pole and to get me back alive. And that's what I have with my crew. And in 33 years, we've never had anybody seriously injured. We've never injured anybody. We've never been convicted of a felony, and we've never been sued because we're going up against people who are committing crimes on the high seas. We are there to uphold international conservation law, and we act in accordance with the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for non-government organizations and individuals to do so. And when people say, you know, why are you taking the law into your own hands? We're doing it because the governments of the world do not have the economic and the political will to do it. We have all of the rules and regulations and treaties we need to protect the oceans, but we don't have the politicians willing to do anything about it. And for instance, with the protection of whales, it all sounds very good. Everybody signs the papers, but when it comes down to enforcement, they don't do it. There's no difference between the Japanese poachers in the Southern Ocean and elephant poachers in East Africa, except for the fact that the elephant poachers are black, they're poor, and they get shot for what they're doing. These guys get away with it because they're wealthy and come from a wealthy nation that's able to bully other nations into getting what they want. We've had to do what we've been doing over the years, taking exceptional risks, because one of the things I do ask my crew, are you willing to die for a whale? Are you willing to risk your life for a whale? And if they say no, we don't take them. And when people say that's asking an awful lot, to ask people to risk their life to protect an animal. And I said, well, you know, I don't understand that. In our world, we ask people to risk their lives, people die, and we kill for oil wells or for real estate. I think it's a far more noble endeavor to risk your life to protect an endangered species or a threatened habitat. And it really comes down to what our values are. One of the things that I've found over the years that is required really to do what we do is to have an immunity to criticism. And quite frankly, I don't really care what people think about what we do out there. And I'll tell you why. My life was changed back in 1975 when I was first mate on the Greenpeace voyage to protect the whales. And we had come up with this idea to save whales. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time. We thought all we had to do was put ourselves between the harpoon and the whales, and nobody would risk killing a human being to kill a whale. And so in 1975, in June, Bob Hunter and I found ourselves in a small little rubber boat in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel, only 60 miles off the northern coast of California. This is before the 200-mile limit. And in front of us, 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver my boat and block his path. And this worked for about 25 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came down the catwalk. He screamed into the ear of the harpooner. He looked at us and he smiled and brought his finger across his throat, and that's when we realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. A few moments later, there was this incredible explosion, and the harpoon flew over our head and slammed into the backside of one of the whales in front of us. It was a female, and she screamed. It's like a woman's scream. It's very eerie, and she rolled on her side in a fountain of blood, and suddenly the largest whale in the pod slammed the water with his tail and disappeared. And he swam right underneath of us and threw himself out of the water, hurled himself straight at the harpooner on the Soviet vessel to protect his pod, to protect his kind. But they were ready for him with an unattached harpoon, and he very nonchalantly pulled the trigger and sent a second harpoon point blank into this whale's head, and it exploded, and the whale fell back in the water screaming in agony, rolling on the surface. And as he rolled about on the surface, I caught his eye, and he looked at me, and he dove. And I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming at us real fast. And this whale came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move was just to simply fall forward on top of us and crush us. And as his head rose up out of the water, and I saw this eye come up from the ocean, and I looked into that eye, I saw something in that eye that changed my life forever, because I saw understanding. That whale understood what we were trying to do, because I could see the effort that the whale made to pull himself back. I could see his muscles clench. He pulled himself back, and his head began to slip back into the sea, and I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. He could have killed us, and he made the decision not to do so. So the fact that I'm alive today is because that whale made that decision. So I owe my life to that whale. But I saw something else in that eye, something that really had a profound impact on me. And it was pity, not for himself, but for us. That we could commit such an act of blasphemy, that we could take life so thoughtlessly, so ruthlessly, so mercilessly,